Good morning and welcome. My name is Megan Lancaster and I will be your service coordinator today. Today's reflection, the easy spirit of generosity, will be given by our minister, Reverend Dr. Leon Dunkley. I welcome all of you today, and we, the congregation, welcome most particularly those of you who may be visiting. If you are new to North Chapel, consider signing the guest book at the back of the sanctuary. Lastly, if you need a hearing assistance device or a large print hymnal, those may also be found at the back of the sanctuary. One announcement, the Red Cross Blood Drive will be here this Friday, December 5th, from 12:30 to 5:30. You can see details information in the order of service, but in the back we have some posters. If there's someplace in your area or along your normal route in life that you think could use a poster and you're willing to take one or several to post up around town, around your area, please do so on your way out today. Lastly, this would be a good moment, if you have not already, to silence anything you have that might make noise. Phones, anything else, this is the moment.
Hi, a while ago, not everyone's here today, but a while ago I announced there was gonna be an LHS musical, and this coming week is production week, so I just thought I'd say again, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday next week are the show dates, so you should definitely come check it out. It's really cool. Everything is being put together, and we have a lot of work to do this coming week. I think tomorrow we have a 13-hour rehearsal, but yeah, we're working hard and it's really cool and everything's coming together, so you should definitely come. Tickets are by donation, and if you have any other questions you can ask me. Oh, it's called Water for Elephants. At the Lebanon Opera House, yes.
Can I just pause for a second?
Yes.
I just noticed Pluto's jacket and the arm. As a former football player, when I had my varsity jacket, we had our numbers on it. It says vocalist.
Nice.
That's great.
So as I was prepping for today, mulling over our theme of generosity this month, I kept coming back to this season, one of gratitude and giving. And it's easy to think of generosity in terms of what we give materially, perhaps with our time, but it can be so much more. And as I was considering this, I kept coming back to a gift this church gave me once long ago, Gibran's book, The Prophet, which has a piece on giving. And he writes, "And then a rich man said, 'Speak to us of giving.' And he answered, 'You give but little when you give of your possessions. It is when you give of yourself that you truly give. For what are your possessions but things you keep and guard for fear you may need them tomorrow? And tomorrow, what shall tomorrow bring to the overprudent dog burying bones in the trackless sand as he follows the pilgrims to the holy city? And what is fear of need but need itself? It is not dread of thirst when your well is full, the thirst that is unquenchable. There are those who give little of the much that they have, and they give it for recognition, and their hidden desire makes their gifts unwholesome. And there are those who have little and give it all. These are the believers in life and the bounty of life, and their coffer is never empty. There are those who give with joy, and that joy is their reward. And there are those who give with pain, and that pain is their baptism. There are those who give and know not pain in giving, nor do they seek joy, nor give with mindfulness of virtue. They give, as in yonder valley the myrtle breathes its fragrance into space. Through the hands of such as these God speaks, and from behind their eyes he smiles upon the earth. It is well to give when asked, but it is better to give unasked through understanding. And to the open-handed, the search for one who shall receive is joy greater than giving. And is there aught you would withhold? All you have shall someday be given. Therefore give now, that the season of giving may be yours and not your inheritors. You often say, I would give, but only to the deserving. The trees in your orchards say not so, nor the flocks in your pasture. They give that they may live, for to withhold is to perish. Surely he who is worthy to receive his days and his nights is worthy of all else from you. And he who has deserved to drink from the ocean of life deserves to fill his cup from your little stream. And what desert greater shall there be than that which lies in the courage and the confidence, nay, the charity of receiving? And who are you that men should rend their bosom and unveil their pride, that you may see their worth naked and their pride unabashed? See first that you yourself deserve to be a giver and an instrument of giving. For in truth it is life that gives unto life, while you who deem yourself a giver are but a witness. And you receivers, and you are all receivers, assume no weight of gratitude, lest you lay a yoke upon yourself and upon him who gives. Rather rise together with the giver and on his gifts as on wings. For to be over mindful of your debt is to doubt his generosity, who has the free-hearted earth for mother and God for father. While at the time that I got this gift from the church, my transition from middle school to high school, I may not have appreciated it, and it has turned out to be one of the best gifts I've ever gotten, something to consider. And I have reread this book many times and returned to certain sections over and over. And though it was not expensive or fancy, it is a gift that has been generous in spirit. And while I may not have been particularly gracious recipient at the time, over the years I've come to appreciate it so much. And though our theme of November, generosity, is ending, I hope that as we are in this holiday season, we may all continue to reflect on it and on the many ways we can be generous in our lives. As we head into our time of meditation, consider taking some deep breaths, breathing thoughtfully, remembering it is not we who breathe, but the Spirit of life that breathes through us.
Good morning. I want to start by explaining the photo on the covers of your orders of service. Can you make out what that is? It's a bunch of men in front of a shed rallied around a picnic table. Across the middle of which you should imagine a little 3-inch high net. And between their frying pans and shovels, is bouncing a ping pong ball. I chose this image because years ago, at a big family gathering up in New Hampshire, there was a ping pong tournament. And speaking broadly of my family, two brothers were gathered downstairs and were ferociously playing the most important match of the annual post-Thanksgiving ping pong tournament. And all you could hear from downstairs were oohs and ahs and ohs as the points were scored. All the points were hard won. And after about a half an hour of this, some other family members came down and they said, who's winning? And I turned to my brother, writ large, and I said, have you been keeping score? And he said, no, have you? And I was like, That was one of the best ping pong games I ever played. So Rick Maston is a minister. He's a Universalist minister. He was ordained without going to seminary. He was ordained by his congregation in Carmel, California. He was ordained by them because they loved what he said. And congregations inside of Unitarian Universalism have the power to ordain. Do you know you have that power? You have the power to pick any of us and say, you are our leader. It has to be real. But if you choose a leader, you have the power to ordain them in a way that is not recognized nationally and internationally, actually, and professionally. So he was ordained by his congregation without ever going to seminary, and he wrote a series of poems, many of which blew my mind. I met him at Star Island once, years and years ago. I was the Minister of the Week, and he was there as the poet laureate of a different conference. And there's as you may know, there's a chapel at the highest point at Star Island, a chapel that was built back in 1800, when the original chapel was burned. I was traveling up there because it's a terribly romantic place, and I wanted to spend a little bit of time up there alone, so I grabbed my guitar, and I was heading up there in the middle of the day when nobody uses it, and on the path, I ran into Rick Maston. So I said hello, we exchanged hellos. I told him that I met him when I was like, I don't know, what was it, 18 or whatever it was. We had a nice little chat, and I expected him to go along his way, but he turned up towards the chapel too. And he said, oh, were you going to the chapel? And I was like, yeah, I was going, but why don't you take it and I'll come back at another time. And he said, no, why don't you take it and I'll come back at another time. And then we fought about that for like 8 minutes, just exchanging those lines. And then he finally said, why don't we both go up together? I'll offer a poem and then you can play a song and we'll go back and forth. So we had a wonderful afternoon up there. So I wanna share one of the poems that I really love about him. He had an interesting journey through Unitarian Universalism because sometimes it broke his heart. Sometimes it wasn't a powerful enough experience for himself, and he felt really bad about it. So he wrote a song called A Friend that I'd like to share with you. He wrote, if you are like me, you go along, oops, sorry, I think I missed part of it, yes. If you are like me, even though you're not quite sure of the question, you keep looking for the answer. And every now and then, you bump into someone who's looking good and looking wise, so you tag along behind him, picking up the punchlines, thinking, hot damn, this one's gonna get me home. And if you're like me, you go along with them until they say something stupid or do something human, and then the whole thing goes off the edge of the table and shatters like a lamp. Sometimes, when it matters enough, you try to put it back together, and what you come up with is far from perfect, but it's a whole lot easier to live with. And then, if you're like me, you go out looking again. That is my experience in Unitarian Universalism, for sure. I was like 6 or 7 years old when I entered this faith, and I was so bright-eyed and open to it all. I was so hopeful and so enthusiastic about a faith that wasn't dogma specific. At the pulpit, on the pulpit, at my home church in Lincroft, New Jersey, the better part of New Jersey. No, I'm sorry. Were insignias from faiths of all around the world. There was a cross, there was a yin and yang symbol, there was the Star of David that a friend of mine used to refer to as the Star of Kevin. Kevin was her son, and he just figured that the star was about him. But there were maybe 15 or so symbols from faiths all around the world, and I grew up believing if we can't find each other, and we can't find one another in faith, how are we going to do it? Otherwise, we can find one another in love. And then when my faith falls short, as it does, because it's a human faith, because it's an imperfect and it's a growing, living faith, we're all a part of it, I get disappointed in it, and it feels like just like the moment in the poem where the lamp goes off the edge of the table and shatters on the ground. And then comes the hard work of figuring out what's important and trying to put the pieces back together again. When we have the experience of putting the pieces back together again, we develop something really beautiful for all of us. So I want to encourage an exploration of that process. I want to encourage that sort of generosity of the heart that allows us to make mistakes with one another, that allows us to fall short of who we are and who we can be, that allows us to be the full people that we are. I grew up believing that my minister in New Jersey was a Presbyterian. He was not. I thought he was a Presbyterian because he graduated from Princeton Theological Seminary, and he was the minister at a church that was profoundly humanist. Lincroft, New Jersey is right next to Homedale, New Jersey, which is the home of Bell Laboratories. So there were a lot of engineers in the congregation. Engineers talking about God is a comedy show. It's an interesting thing. Some of them are just really awesome about it. And others are like, well, let's think practically about this. And I'm like, no. That's exactly wrong, but what was cool was that I always thought that Harold was this profoundly Christian man who was called to serve a profoundly humanist congregation and decided to find a way to express the deepest part of himself and the sacred parts of himself without offending the humanist sensibility of the congregation. I thought it was an interesting dance. Years later, I had to do a service for his granddaughter. His granddaughter was in an accident and died. And I was asked to do the service in Dedham, Massachusetts, and I went down there and did a beautiful service for a woman named Lucienne, who I never knew. Beautiful girl. After the service, Harold Dean's sister, Harold was my minister, Harold Dean's sister came over to me and she said, that was a beautiful service. It was the first time I met her, and she said, do you think that there's really a God? And I looked at her and I said, oh dear, ask your brother. Why are you asking me? You should ask him, he'll tell you, and you'll be able to receive the answer much more easily from him, Christian that he was, And she said, oh, Leon, Harold was an atheist. There was something so sacred and so beautiful about that man that for decades I misunderstood his humanist compassion for Christianity. Why do we think that those two things are incompatible? Does that make sense? there was this guy, it's an influencer online. I saw him on Facebook, where I get all my news and information. I'm just kidding. But I was flipping through. There's one of the things I do to alleviate my anxiety, actually. I just kind of flip through and I watch people's scrolls and square dances and little MMA fights and like Obama clips or whatever my algorithm gives me. And one of the things that they gave me was this sort of short diatribe by a man named Adam Allred, who is an influencer online. He also runs Doughboys, which is a sort of modern masculinity workshop. He's kind of a hardcore man guy, you know, like, come on, man, we need to get together, and my first marriage failed because I wasn't masculine enough, and so I'm a little bit sketched out by him, but he's also really smart, and he's also powerfully Christian, and he said this. I want to quote what he said. He said, he was talking about religion, and he said, Jesus wasn't a Christian, he was a Jew. And he didn't come to create a religion. The Bible as we know it didn't even exist when Jesus walked the earth, not when Paul wrote his letters, not when Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John recorded their accounts. The Bible was literally compiled hundreds of years later by a pagan emperor for political reasons, and that should tell you something. Is any of that offensive to anyone? It's just genuinely a question, because there were lots of reactions online, and they were spirited, challenging all of these quotes that are simply true. And then he said that the words of the Bible, the sacred words of the Bible, come to us today through the lives of men who were deeply flawed, and that these sacred words have been written, rewritten, translated, retranslated, filtered through kings and priests and politicians, and then argued over for 2,000 years by 45,000 different Christian denominations, all of whom swear that they are the right ones. We're expected to make easy sense of this. Or there's another thing that's possible. We could just look inside of our hearts. Look inside of our undefended, vulnerable, and generous hearts. Rick Maston also wrote these words in a poem called Top Seated. He wrote, "He perfected his service, his opening statement until it could not be returned. He entered many conversations, but he died alone. Center court, in his spotless whites." Do you get the imagery? Let me go through it one more time. He perfected his service, his opening statement until it could not be returned. He entered many conversations, but he died alone, center court, in his spotless whites. How many times do we enter conversations prepared to win them? How many times do we go in heavily defended and armored, ready to make our point at any cost? We long to win, as if to prove something by winning. And we know that games are fun to play most of the time, but it's the winning that drives us. How often do we practice to learn how to better enjoy ourselves? We play to win. We long to win, even though that's not what life's about. Winning isn't really why it's fun to play the game. But strangely, vulnerability is the reason why it's fun. Vulnerability is the reason why it's fun to play the games. And playing games gives us the time we need and the chance we need to know someone and to allow ourselves to be known. Winning is cool, but getting to know ourselves and one another, that's about the best game there is. What would it mean if we, as a community, decided to be generous with vulnerability? Decided to spend it generously at local businesses around this town? decided to invest it better than money, what would Jesus do with that one? What would Elvis do? Or you, or me, or someone like Brene Brown. Do you know Brene Brown? Brene Brown is an academic. She is a researcher and a writer. She tells us great stories, and she gave this great talk that went viral years ago and brought her more fame than she was ready for. She's awesome. She talks a lot about shame and guilt and vulnerability. I think that vulnerability is the core of her work. She says that if we want to be brave with our lives, vulnerability is the key. And she starts by asking simple questions. Do you know what vulnerability is? It's not an idle question for her. She's not being rhetorical. She's a practical girl from Texas. She wants an answer that she can use. She wants the best answer out there, and she'll provide it if others cannot. She tells us that vulnerability is joy. Joy in a different form, I guess. She says that joy is so vulnerable, so vitally important to us, and so precious, that we would sooner choose to live a disappointed life than to get excited about something and risk joy and risk getting sucker punched by life. We can't always win the game, and there's even a saying, right? You can't win them all. So if we're afraid of getting sucker punched and we figure out ways to protect ourselves, where does that really leave us? When we strengthen our defensive strategies, it might make us feel less vulnerable, but it rarely fills our hearts with joy. Rarely does it make us laugh like playful children. Brene Brown reminds us that it is not fear that gets in the way of being brave with our lives and brave with our work. It is the armor that we reach for to protect ourselves when we're afraid, and how that armor moves us away from love and true connection. So when I told that story about the ping pong tournament that happened over the holiday dinner, I left out the part that makes it vulnerable to me. That dinner happened in Durham, New Hampshire, with a family that I no longer connect with. I no longer connect with them because I suffered a divorce not long after that in 1994. And the ping pong tournament was with two brothers who were me and my dearest friend. So I covered that up so that I could tell that part of the story. I've also had this practice of talking about my family as if my family is me and my sister and my mother and my father. And I talk about it that way because that's the way that it's acceptable to my family. But when I think about my family, it includes my beloved Kathy, who I am no longer married to, and it includes all of her 8 other brothers and sisters. She came from a big family. I got into a habit of not telling the truth about my life because it made me feel vulnerable. And then I cut off that part of my life, and I got stingy with my truth. And there's no reason whatsoever to do that. It's just life unfolding as life unfolds. Now, if I'm at that Thanksgiving table and I'm asked to think about my family, I still kind of use the practices that I learned when I was young. But if I'm honest with myself, I still recognize Tom and Ralph and John and Carolyn and Jean and Ralph Sr. as my family. They're my family, and I invite them here, front row. If Kathy was here, she'd be like, yeah, of course, and she'd come up and tell you all about it. I wish that she would. I shouldn't probably mention her by name, I'm sorry. But the point of it is, if I am not brave enough to speak my truth, my generosity becomes really constrained. Even my breath, the tension in my chest, becomes really constrained. And if I accept myself and pledge myself to the best that I can be, then something far more beautiful and much more unexpected happens. I move into something that I didn't know before. So the two sides of my family are represented by these two different songs, and I'll kind of close with this idea. One side of my family, the righteous side of my family, would sing songs that were like hip in the late 60s and early 70s. Would sing a song by Joe Cocker that he sang at Woodstock in New York. Did you know there's another Woodstock? The song went, "Come and think of all the things that we did today. Hear and laugh about our funny little ways while we still have a few minutes to breathe. And I know that it's time that you must leave, but darling, be home soon. I couldn't bear to wait an extra minute if you dawdled. Darling, be home soon. It's not just these few hours, but I've been waiting since I toddled for the great relief of having you to talk to." That's one of the best lines in poetry. I've been longing for the great relief of having you to talk to. Then another side of my family, the righteous side of my family. I know that the other side was righteous too, but in my family we have an abundance of righteousness. They would sing a song by John Denver that sang, "He was born in the summer of his 27th year." Do you know that song? "Coming home to a place he'd never been before." Please. "He left yesterday behind him. You might say he was born again. You might say he found the key to every door." The door that I wish I could open between one side of my family and the other side of my family is the door that keeps us connected in love. The door that keeps us connected in vulnerability. We have found ways to fight about everything these days. But if we give up the fight, vulnerability and generosity are there in great abundance. I love the story about Rick Maston pushing the button for the elevator, watching the doors part, walking in and seeing the other people face to face, pushing the button and then not turning around. I wonder what it calls us to when we have to be that kind of honest with ourselves. And I wonder if in that moment there's a place for generosity. So if you find yourself in some kind of argument because of the things that are going on these days, because of the presence of the military in cities, or because of the abductions that are taking place in the name of ICE, or because of what we've done with the public conversation, or because of how we're struggling to find what leadership means today, or because of the boats in Venezuela, or because of the things that we hear in the news. Imagine taking a break from all of that, walking downstairs or outside, either with proper paddles or with shovels and frying pans, and bouncing a little ping pong ball over a little table. Not in order to win the game, but in order to spend time with one another in beauty, in gratitude, and in deepest generosity. May we find it in our hearts and in our prayer and in our play to open for generosity, open to vulnerability, open to that truth in us, which is the vital truth that wants to come forth, that wants to speak out loud, that wants to be seen and known, and wants to give itself away to other open hearts who are open in the same way. In these days, after Thanksgiving, may our gratitude continue as we move into the holiday season and into the deeper part of Winster. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen.